Good morning and welcome back to the lecture series on tribal studies, interdisciplinary approaches and perspectives. So, today we are going to talk about the future scopes of tribal studies within humanities and social sciences. So, how tribal studies as a field has been emerging, evolving and expanding within the field of humanities and social sciences. Approaching the study of the tribes through the perspectives of history, archaeology or culture alone naturally restricts the investigation to the parameters of each of these disciplines. So, it is a well established fact in academia by now that disciplinary approaches which form the core of inquiry in individual fields such as history, political science, economics and archaeology are characteristically specialized and therefore they are limited in their own terms. Drawing on the question of disciplinary limitations, scholar and critic M.C. Behra observes, I quote, "The inadequacy of a discipline but creates interest in complementing the role of disciplines for a comprehensive understanding of a phenomenon over time and space." Unquote. The increasing significance of interdisciplinary approaches is widely recognized in modern academia, which leads to a rise in interdisciplinary fields. Even within disciplines, the more current topics are often explored using interdisciplinary methods, which provide a better view and a better understanding of the subject. Behra also asserts that the tribal communities have deep roots which involve and expect extensive study. Colonial powers, upon their initial encounter with the tribal communities, struggled to understand these people due to their own ignorance about the tribal way of life, as well as due to the fact that they were imposing their western oriented historical perspectives to inform their study, to inform their investigation of the tribals. Consequently, the colonists, British anthropologists, failed mostly to properly understand and investigate the history of these groups, and instead they would impose labels such as tribes, aborigines, and not only that, they would judge these communities by calling them savages, by calling them backward and so forth. None of these adjectives are positive, they are loaded with negative meanings. So, the colonists and by and large the non-tribals' lack of understanding of tribal history till a long time led them to limit the scope of human history, thereby confining it within a narrow, supposedly scientific framework, a framework that they asserted to be scientific, but which would be rendered as inadequate when trying to study the tribal people in terms of those specific western parameters and standards. Furthermore, we see that the colonists but also subsequent non-tribal scholars in the post-colonial period dismissed the oral traditions of the tribals and called these traditions as unscientific, and therefore refused to consider the alternative approaches that used the oral sources in order to reconstruct the history of these pre-literate societies. In doing so, such early scholars have overlooked the significant role of tribal history in shaping the larger human history. So, they were mostly driven by a very Western centric understanding of knowledge that is scripted, that is documented, that has a singular, a final, pointed meaning, as opposed to such history with a capital H. In tribal societies, we have ramifications. The question of any folklore or any parable or any poem not having any fixity to it, any conclusive, definitive structure to it, is something that might have confused the white researchers or the white anthropologists. they would be listened, remembered and retold to the next generations usually, and there would be certain additions and modifications while they were being passed down from one generation to another, because there is a process of memorization, retelling, hearing, and thereby the knowledge becomes more fluid. Each generation's own consciousness, own sensitivity, own experiences add on to these stories. The folklores change from the folk tales, the myths, the myths surrounding each deity changes from village to village. These ramifications, these kinds of interesting fluidity within knowledge is something that the white people were not akin to. They were not familiar with knowledge also changing or traveling rather with in time and space. So, they would not so much consider such a ramified, such discursive knowledge system or tradition as worthy of being included as any form of historical data. So, in doing so, the early anthropologists and ethnographers overlooked the significant role of tribal history in shaping the larger human history. So, we see that history was largely overlooked in anthropology till recently, and for a considerable period of time oral tradition has been neglected, and it has not been treated as a legitimate source of information that may add to historical data. So, this entire attitude or approach only began to change with the development of newer fields such as anthropological history and ethnohistory within the traditional fields of anthropology and ethnography, a shift that was made possible through new ways of understanding what comprises knowledge. What is knowledge? Is only documented knowledge or a book a strict source of knowledge? Can only book be considered as text that emanates understanding, that enables understanding about a people? So, formation of anthropological history, ethnohistory, all these newer disciplines actually were spurred by methodological innovations such as oral history traditions as well as the emergent field of memory studies, where apart from history and historiography, the memoirs, the autobiographies, the writings that are a result of interview process or a person's testimonial literature, all these things were being given validity and they were treated as legitimate knowledge. So, the essential point emerging from such evolution or such development in knowledge system, in scholarship, is that a single disciplinary approach now becomes inadequate for comprehensively explaining the various aspects of any people's life or lifestyle, both as a unified group and when compared to other groups across time and space. So, studying one group or attempting a comparative study between two groups cannot be done successfully unless there is an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary approach. Only history, only social science, only anthropology cannot do a well-rounded justice. There has to be intersection or crossroads of different disciplines. The whole study should be lying somewhere at the crossroads of let us say history, cultural studies, gender studies, ethnography, archaeology, anthropology and so forth. Vinita Damodaran and Sangeeta Dasgupta note that despite the term Adivasi being a later development, a substantial amount of writing concerning the tribal communities and their issues can be found from the late 18th and 19th centuries, the period of the East India Company and the British Raj. Many and varied voices of the Adivasis are now being heard even as they affirm their identity, they start to articulate their politics and creatively engage with the state and its institutions. So, the voices coming from different directions become very important, and interdisciplinary approaches think it is imperative to include these voices, to take into consideration the complexity, the layeredness, the nuances that these voices render to the study of the tribes. So, it cannot remain a very simplified, simplistic, unilinear, homogeneous way of understanding the tribes anymore. The voices from within the communities challenge such simplistic perspectives. Living in geographically diverse parts of India, pursuing different livelihoods and speaking numerous languages, the tribal experiences are now wide ranging and they encompass a multitude of realities. As stories of tribal marginalization, resilience and assertion bring them into sharper focus, the academic discipline of Adivasi studies centered on the Adivasi experience gains increasing relevance. So, the tribal people's stories and experiences point to the rich diversity of cultures and ways of thinking that must be included within the nation's understanding, and they also offer potential for different ways of living and existing on this planet. Seema Mins, in her book chapter titled Ethnography and Emerging Trend in Rock Art Research, which came out in 2020, highlights that the recent academic approaches to rock art involve a methodological shift which seeks to understand the past of the people linked to the art or to similar traditions. Such reconstruction often benefits from integrating archaeological techniques with ethnographic research on these tribal communities. Despite the impact of modernity and globalization on the tribal way of life, these communities across India still strongly adhere to their original traditions, and they still adhere to they still practice their belief systems, rituals, ceremonies and art forms. So, talking about the indigenous traditions, we see that painting, which is an ancient tribal art, continues to be practiced. It thrives among the tribal communities, with several tribes that are renowned for their distinct painting styles. These include the Santhal, Gond, Baiga, Kanwar, Bhil, Bhilala, Saura, Worli, Rathwa as well as the Naik. Some of these tribal paintings like Saura, Worli, Gond, Rathwa, Bhil and Muria art have become so well known that they are identified by the tribe's name. Similar to other indigenous and rock art traditions, Indian tribes also decorate their house walls or floors, which they call as the bheet, with paintings for a variety of specific reasons, which include magical practices, expressions of their belief systems, celebrations, rituals, ceremonies, auspicious events, cultural festivals, secular themes, expressions of expressing their myths and a collective belief system, expressions of gratitude as well as to appease the malevolent deities. So, here Mins explains that some historians suggest that the Worli painting tradition from Maharashtra has its roots stretching back to the Neolithic period, specifically between 2500 to 3000 BC. Located at the foot of Bhimbetka mountain, which is renowned for its World Heritage rock art, this tiny Gond village of Bhinyapur, it's a tiny village called Bhinyapur, it's a Gond village. It exhibits a way of life that has not changed much since the Neolithic times. That's how invaluable and precious tribal art can be, for its timelessness, for its beauty, as well as because it depicts, it carries in it history of human civilization as old as the Neolithic period. So, further Mins argues that the indigenous painting traditions are significant for in-depth rock art research to reconstruct the past cultures which other disciplines miss due to their present focus. So, history as a discipline alone cannot study the prehistoric life. Combining ethnography with rock art research can improve our interpretations and our endeavors to reconstruct the tribal pasts. Once again, the cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary approaches, that becomes an imperative, that becomes urgent, and it is seen as a timely intervention in the field of tribal studies. So, as a way of concluding, we see that understanding the tribal communities requires moving beyond any single disciplinary lens. We should rather have multiple disciplinary lenses involved in these studies. Interdisciplinary approaches drawing on history, archaeology, anthropology, art studies as well as others, crucial for overcoming the limitations of individual fields. Each field with its own parameters is delimited and in a way handicapped. So, such handicap, such limitation can be overcome when there is multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary approach. By incorporating indigenous knowledge such as art forms like painting alongside archaeological and ethnographic methods, we can achieve a more comprehensive, a more well-rounded understanding about the tribal pasts as well as about the tribal present. So, this interdisciplinary perspective is increasingly crucial in tribal studies as tribal communities navigate modernity while maintaining connections to their rich cultural heritage. With this, we come to the end of our lecture today. Let us meet with another topic and another round of discussions in our next lecture. Thank you.